Welcome to GG No Re. We're going to do something a little different this time. Rather than just playing the raw audio of our actual play, I'm going to introduce the various moments in the play session. I don't mean moments as in the technical term that I'm using in my current campaign, but I mean things where the situation changes to go a different direction. I will do an intro to the episode and then highlight bits of the episode as we encounter them and play clips from the episode. Maybe this will be more enjoyable to the listener. Maybe it will be less work for me. I'm not sure, probably not. Let me know what you think about it. I guess I'll call this a focused actual play or highlighted actual play. Without further ado, let's get on with it. After last session's wild and wacky events in which the players discovered that a local priest in the village of Therion was involved in rendering children to some monster for unseemly purposes, and then executing judgment on said priest and said monsters, the party took a well-deserved rest. We got a new member joining the party, and a new player. This was Mason, who had never played before.
This is Mason.
Oh yeah.
New to the podcast, and I'm playing Giva, like Black Widow.
Like, no RPGs ever. And he chose a new class that I just inserted to my CCQ campaign, the Black Widow, which is an actual widow that has taken a vow to go about and do D&D things, specifically to help women and children. In the last session, they also recovered a scroll from the monster's lair, and I said that it was written in an equivalent of classical Latin. So John, the cleric...
This is John. I am playing Ryla.
No.
Ryla.
No.
The
Cleric.
Oblate Cleric.
Yes. An oblate. That means
Oblate.
you were like given to the church like Samuel.
Yep.
In the OG days. He was the only one in the party who could read it. So I, in the intervening week, wrote it down both in the script that I made up for it, then the transliteration, and then the translation. Take a listen. All right, so unfinished business from last time. Like I said before I came over here and chat, I have an iCloud reminders list that I have everything I have to do on. And a lot of those, probably an inordinate number of those, have to do with RPGs. One of those things was to write up what you guys got last session and the session before that. And I finally did. You have monetary values now. The other thing you found is when you went in to fight the wolf man thing, you got several things from that lair. One of the things you got was a scroll that I said John's character, the cleric, knew how to read, but other people didn't. This is what it looks like, the writing on there. Everybody can look at this, but none of you will understand what it is because it's something I made up in college.
I remember that.
So everyone
I can
else...
read that and it's very vulgar.
Is that in the book that you wrote too?
You've literally drawn a penis on your Daniel.
In the hieroglyph.
I don't think this counts.
Like, I'm curious, does this universe we're playing in have anything to do with the book you wrote?
Yes, the book I wrote
He mentioned that.
was in the same universe.
Okay.
This is like thousands of years later, he said.
Yes.
Then when you wrote your book.
Yes.
No. From the setting which the book takes place. Not thousands of years from which
Yes,
you wrote the
thank
book.
you. It was only
I
like
was
10 years
confused
ago.
about that. Thank you,
I'm
Tim,
glad.
for clarifying.
I cleared that up.
This was inscribed on what?
A scroll.
A scroll.
So,
Parchment?
like calfskin.
Vellum? What'd you say?
Yeah, like vellum.
Okay.
This is the transliteration. So you can pronounce that if you want. No, don't do it.
Don't do it. Remember.
Can you do it?
I can do
Evil
it.
Dead.
Do it.
Don't do
Here,
it.
Mason, you do it.
It's got very
More loudly than you said.
consistent pronunciation, but it's basically if you learned Latin like I did, that's how you pronounce it.
I think I'm not going to attempt this.
Ooh, let me. I know nothing.
Not to offend the audience.
I will give you the first line, okay? So this
It'll
would
be
be
funny.
Ni valtumira nainda yana kolavoha, which means, there you go, John. So it's like 9 lines, something like that. After this bit of nerdery, we resumed the actual game. They started in the inn, and the women in the party, that's Ryla, the cleric, John's character, and then I think Giva, the Black Widow, Mason's character. They're staying in the rectory of the priest that they had killed in the last session. The men are at the inn, and they get a knock on the door. The innkeeper is relaying a message from the Baron. Baron Therion, because the village they're in, Therion, is the county seat of Therion County. The Baron has invited them for dinner, and I asked them if there was any reason that they would refuse, and they said no. And so I described the passage up to the Baron's manor, and during the description we had a funny moment. I'm describing the fortifications outside and the banners, and here it is.
Because you said square at first, and then you changed it to rectangle.
I did. I wanted to be more
This is the fence perimeter or the building?
more exact. The building itself.
It's very important, Stacy.
We're never gonna play. It's 9:36.
And you'll notice that there are banners waving outside.
Well, that's right. Old man shuts off at like 10:30.
I had my dinner 4 hours ago, and I'm just about to wear down here. You guys remember FDR? I went by the wax museum and gave him the finger. After this, and a bunch of goofing around, the party finally manages to go up to the Baron's estate and meet him face to face. And he's a little different than they would have expected, both from how I normally run characters and from the setting as a whole. It's your boy, Baron Therion. Come on, have a seat.
AKA DJ Jazzy Trevor.
John is like, I cannot believe this is happening.
This guy is likable.
Thank you, my lord Therion.
Yeah, come on up here. Come on.
invitation.
Come on. Come on. Hey,
Rita literally
Hey!
sits as far as she can away from this guy.
buddy, butler, bring the muscadine.
Ooh, girl.
Oh,
We got some props up in here. And by prop, I
you
mean
just pull up
literal
muscadine wine?
muscadine
Guys,
wine.
this is real life.
Oh boy.
IRL. Where's the...
Never once tried muscadine wine.
It's not that great.
It's no.
it's very sweet.
It's the sweet kind.
Okay.
not that
I don't
great.
mind sweet wines.
You might mind this.
I might.
So the Baron had several things on the agenda for the players. The first was to congratulate them for what they had done in the town. The Baron, I decided, rather than being an oppositional character like probably most of the people that they encounter, was going to be a reasonable fellow, although quirky in certain ways that we'll see later. So he wanted to invite them purely to congratulate them, but also because he knew that the party contained a cleric, John's character, Rila. He wanted to ask her for advice on who he should appoint as the next priest in his parish. Then there was an existing bounty on the person that they suspected in the village of having taken the children. They were wrong about who it was. It was the priest, but they just suspected another character named Deacon Celestine, and there was a bounty on his head. Tim's character, Canis, is a bounty hunter and was tracking that bounty. So he said the bounty is still open, but of course, now we're not trying to catch him and punish him. Instead, we're trying to catch him and see where he's run off to. They think he's hiding in the woods somewhere. So that's a thing on their agenda that they've got to track is, can we find this deacon or at least see what's become of him? Next, the Baron invited them into his reading room or salon, where he wanted to give them a chance to do a special quest with him. He's a hunter, as you can tell from all his paraphernalia and his manner and his crest, and he wants the PCs to help him hunt for the Lord of the Forest, this mythical buck with 27 points. I mean, it's the symbol of his house. However, it's considered somewhat of a rumor in this area, maybe even a ghost or some kind of fey spirit. From the way the Baron is talking about it, the players determined that this Lord of the Forest lives back behind the forester's hut where they found the monster they fought in the first session. So they agreed to go in a week's time to go on the hunt with the Baron. But in the meantime, they decide to go back to where the campaign first started, behind the forester's hut, to scout out the area back there where the Lord of the Forest is reputed to be. And previously I had told them on a meta level that when we were first starting out, I didn't have a lot of content prepped, but I told them that back behind the forester's hut, there was a path crawl. A path crawl is a game structure, like a dungeon, except it's meant for smaller scale overland wilderness travel. So between dungeon exploration and hex crawling. It's kind of like a point crawl, except it's more concrete than a point crawl because the objects that you're interacting with are naturalistic. They're paths of various kinds. And my players already knew what that meant, so they were ready to go, and we headed toward the path crawl. I should note that all this so far had been from less than 1 page of notes. I had simply, after this session the last time, had written down during my lunch break at work an agenda for next time. And the way I came up with the agenda was to think about what consequences would naturally result from the actions. And I wanted to prejudice my thinking in this in a way that would recognize the actions of the players and provide them more opportunities for adventure or for simply making their mark on the setting. Here's an example of that. When I said that the Baron wanted advice on establishing the new priest, that was purely because I wanted some other way to validate that the players were making an impact on the setting. And having that bit of input is a way to do that. I knew he was going to have to come up with a new priest anyway, based on the way church and state relate in this setting. And so I thought, this guy's kind of a frat boy kind of figure. Why would he trust himself to make that decision? He'd want an advisor. And why not this new, bold cleric that's just come into town? So that's what I suggested. And I had previously written down in my prep that there was this character, the Lord of the Forest, in the forest behind the forester's hut, where the party first encountered their first CCQ monster. And so I already knew that existed, so I'm doing the thing that's classic in D&D prep, which is seeding rumors to stuff. You don't create, well, you can, but in this case I didn't create rumors that link to new content. Instead, I'm making sure the content that I create gets used. So I make the content and then put links to it in other parts of the world. So in this case, thinking how would they come to know about this dear god or whatever it is that lives in the forest. Maybe someone wants to hunt for it. And since we have this hunter figure in the Baron, it makes a perfect fit. Part of the idiosyncratic objectives that I have for this game, for myself, actually not part of the objective for me as a DM is to make the setting ever more compelling. That's for me and for the players, primarily for me. But when you recognize through diegetic mechanisms, i.e. through things that happen in the world, the effects that the players' characters are having on the world, I think that draws them as players into the setting more. I think that's true. I mean, it would for me. So that's a concrete way you can do that. After you finish up, think about what happened to the session and write an agenda for next session that tries as best you can to incorporate what effects the players have had. So we hit the path crawl. I'll link to a blog post that I had written a while ago about how to run a path crawl and what it's about. Between each node on the path crawl, generally you have interesting locations separated by nodes of empty space. So you can get lost on a path crawl if it's dense enough. And these empty space nodes function as opportunities for navigation and for random encounter checks. I have my random encounter tables divided into 3 or 4 different tables right now that are general, that apply no matter where you are in the campaign. I've got encounters for the road, encounters for the wilderness, encounters for the city, and there might be one more, who knows. But in this case, a path in the woods is still considered a road. It's not considered the wilderness. The wilderness is when you go off path, wandering around and who knows where. It's much more dangerous to do that, although you can find perhaps better rewards. Anyway, they stick to the road so they don't have a chance of getting lost mechanically. They can just lose track of where they are in the actual world. But this path crawl is not terribly complex, so I didn't expect them to get lost. Instead, they explored a while until my random encounter checks, which I used a D12 because I didn't want them to have random encounters too often. It wouldn't make sense at this scale. So I used the D12, and on a 1, they would have an encounter. And then I would roll in my random encounters table for roads. The tables I'm using are on Chartopia, which is a random table web application, but it's the best one that's ever existed. Google Chartopia RPG random table, and you'll find it. The good thing about Chartopia, which I've sung its praises before, and I will do so again, is that it lets you create your own tables, yada yada. That's who cares? A ton of things do that. The good thing about it is that it lets you organize tables that you've created or that other people have created in two forms. Folders, which are just what they sound like, just folders, and you have subfolders, or collections, which are just a general grouping of tables. Unfortunately, right now, you can't put other people's tables into your collections, but you can put other people's tables into your folders. I think collections are meant to be more public-facing, so that's what I did. I recently took all the treasure types from Moldvay 1981 D&D, coded them up, and made them public and put them in a public collection. So you can go to Chartopia right now, and as of now, it's the newest published collection. So you can go check that out and automate your treasure generation, which is why I made it, because I'm going to use those for CCQ. Modified a bit, of course. I had that pulled up on my iPad. You could easily have it on your phone. It works well on mobile devices, even my terrible little iPhone 6 that hardly works anymore. And a goblin. Well, it's not really a goblin. What I'm doing is I'm making custom creatures that have their own place in my lore and mythology, and then thinking of the closest D&D analog and using that as shorthand. So while I may not call it a goblin, the way I describe it, that's what the players will think of. And I don't want to go into more of what it actually is, because that would be spoilerific. So they encountered a goblin, and then the next procedure kicked in, and that is the reaction roll. Let me cut in that audio so you can see what that's like. So Stacy left for a second. So do you guys wanted to go down this route? We can just do it while he's
I say, yeah,
Walk.
the non-game trail.
Yeah.
Okay. Woo! Best be on your toes.
How bad is it?
Uh-oh.
If we're in the woods, I want to be holding my spear and my shield. Just be
It's
prepared.
about to get real. It's about to get real.
Is Mason about to experience his first combat situation?
I am thrilled beyond all
All right,
measure.
what I miss?
We walked.
Which path? The left one?
The one that
Yes.
you
Yes.
designated.
Who's in front?
I can.
Who's on second?
Me or Tim? One of us two.
That would be not
You got spear and shield and fancy armor.
Alright, I'm in front.
So you wearing your fancy moon armor,
Yeah.
but with robes over it?
Mhm.
Okay.
If
I would
we're-
like someone to take a moment before this happens. It may be your last.
Great.
My moment will be just noticing how quiet and peaceful these woods are. Listening to the specific bird songs, observing the different botanical life forms here, and
that's interesting. I was going to myself, if I was going to be the one to do it, I was just going to focus on the crunching of pine needles underneath your feet. There's also the faint sound of cicadas far away.
oh
Oh
my
my
gosh.
gosh. Freaking cicadas.
Don't worry, this is not Alabama.
Isn't it?
No.
You guys had trouble?
That's what killed him
Yeah, we had some trouble with cicadas.
with man
We
cicadas.
don't trust cicadas around here.
mancadas.
With where cicadas.
We're cicadas. We're cicadas.
Yeah. So you're in the front, John. You seem to hear something odd. Please roll Dick.
Oh boy.
Did I mention I was praying? 6.
Pray without ceasing. You are not surprised when out from the... So, again, imagine pine needles underfoot, brushing away branches as you go, deer tracks occasionally visible on the sides, and right into the road in front of you steps a thing of palest sky blue. It is about the size of like that kid who bullied you in 6th grade. That's the size of it.
I was the bully.
O'Doul.
in 6th grade.
Wait, like in relation to you when you were in 6th grade, or like
Yeah, ratio.
Yes.
exact? Okay.
Yeah, when you were in 6th grade.
So like
So-
7 feet tall.
No. Unless you went to MBA junior high.
No, I'm
Saying
saying
the monster 7.
it
feet
is
tall.
the exact same size as the bully would have been in 6th grade, or it is
Proportionally.
When you were in
proportionally
6th
feels
grade-
like
No.
he would be the bully to me.
No, no, no.
Okay.
If Bully was 1.7 times taller than you, then this monster is 1.7 times taller than you.
Correct. So this thing is
1.7.
actually shorter than you,
Okay.
but not by a ton. And it has arms that are far too long, and it's like I said, sky blue. but streaked with the red clay of the surrounding area. And its eyes are pale and lambent. And it looks at you with the Australopithecine stupid grin.
Stop.
Synonyms.
Define.
Thesaurus.
Australopithecus, like an old, kind of
Like a humanoid
caveman-ish.
ancestor kind of thing.
Oh.
So like
Pretentious.
thank you. This is hipster D&D.
Osteopithecus.
Yeah, Australopithecus. It looks at you. It is wearing nothing, but its engorged genitalia
Don't.
flop out in a way that is distracting.
Don't say Gord.
And it is carrying what you would call a machete, but it's just extremely crude. And it's covered with blood, and it is dragging a brace of conies in its left hand. It looks at you and raises its machete. What do?
A moment of contemplation of its genitalia first. I make an unrelated relation to the ward earlier, and then I noticed the intelligence of such a creature that also has a vacant look.
Mm.
I make no move.
You just staying there, seeing what happens?
Just
Are you going to
kinda-
do the Chris Pratt
Yeah.
Velociraptor?
That's it.
That
Yeah,
was
just
the
put-
whole movie. This right here.
I've not
Hands out.
Is
I've not
anybody-
seen the movie. I just
Yeah.
know this.
You don't ever need to see it.
You don't.
Somebody give this,
Right.
give this creature some food, some drink, something.
Hey,
I have 2 rations.
I mean, you no harm.
Offer it some food, please. I
I
have
got a
rations,
brace
but I
of
don't.
conies.
I
Why
don't
does he
want to
need-
set my.
He's got
It looks
down.
at you, and it's as if it's not even regarding you at all. Its head turns, and it walks back into the forest that it stepped from.
Let it go.
Let it go.
Let it go.
No, not just let it go.
He's one with the wind and the rain.
Put some distance and follow.
You're gonna follow into the trackless waste?
Well, I mean,
Well, we're reconning, okay, first of all. So we couldn't follow, but we're trying to recon for 2 things. The stag and the tower.
we got to lead on the tower possibly. So that's where we're going. I don't know if I
Let's
just
just
want to follow
continue down
this
the
way.
path. Let's just continue.
But now at least we know this thing. I mean, we could potentially tail it and see
We
where
could
it
tail
goes.
for 5 minutes and then come back.
But what if it aggro? Because we tail
I think
it?
we should tail it. I think we're gonna aggro it. I think we should continue on our path and keep our ears and eyes
Yeah,
open.
and what if the mob has like chaining logic built into it?
Okay. If we're going to do that, then I should take point and grab the dagger. So I could see.
Sure, you can follow it. You can follow it from a lot farther
Presuming that it
distance.
has a heart.
Or any sort of.
Well, before it goes into the woods, I grab the dagger.
Because if it's the Grinch,
But he still has a heart. It's just 3 sizes too small.
It's true.
it's going to be a DC 38 perception check.
I have a 38 die.
So, he said he grabs the dagger before it walks off all the way.
Yeah, it has a heart.
Of course.
Why
I
don't
have.
you just like stand on my shoulder, stand up and right next to me, and walk just behind me?
What I'm saying is, if we're going to follow it,
Dude, that's so choice. You can track it just using your dagger.
that's what I'm saying.
That's,
what he's saying, though.
actually a good idea.
I hadn't even thought about that.
Hello.
Yeah.
So you can see from that I checked the random table to see what was there. Then I checked to see if the party was going to be surprised. That's when I had, I think, John or maybe it was Mason roll a check to see. They weren't surprised. And then I checked after I saw how they reacted. I checked for the creature, although I don't think you could hear that in the audio. But I was secretly checking with a die roll to see his reaction to the party. And in fact, I think the reaction was middling. Like if you were doing a classic 2d6, it would have been a 6 to 8 result. And because they didn't engage hostilely with the creature, it wandered back off into the forest. They could have pursued because, especially with their magic dagger that sticks, which is Stacy's rogue has, they could have pursued and followed it using its circulatory system. But they chose not to. Probably wisely. It's not good to go off into the wilderness without paths. And you will possibly note that in that audio there was the mention of a tower. That tower is from part of the audio that I skipped over because it wasn't terribly interesting. I'll summarize it really quickly. They realized that they had gotten a decent amount of treasure so far and weren't exactly sure how to store it. They'd run into the problem that Bilbo and company had had when they needed to store their troll treasure. There wasn't a bank around, so they just buried it somewhere. Now, they felt that they didn't need to bury it They had a village that they were staying in, but there wasn't any bank there. So the next closest place that would have a bank or some place they could store something like that is the county seat, Sextisa, which was only a couple days away by horse. It was going to be 3 days away to walk, but they decided to rent horses and go down there in 2 days and then come back, because in a week they had to meet with the Baron to go on the hunt. So they went down to the town, and perhaps I'll detail my town creation procedures another time. But of course, while staying at the town, they had to rent a place at the inn. And inns are perfect. One thing that you can do, and that I've done, is when they stay at a tavern, there's a chance that there's a bard there. You can modify that chance based on the urban density of the settlement they're in. So in a town, which is the second to highest density place in my schema, there's hamlets, villages, towns, and cities. So in a town, there's a very good chance that there's a bard there. And when there's a bard, you can use that bard as a mouthpiece for your rumors. So when the players will learn that when there's a bard, it's a good idea to pay attention. And if you have rumors seeded in other ways, you can give a different chance of the rumors from the bard being true, so that they're more likely to pay attention to bards and want to be around them. So this bard told the song of the Blue Maiden, who was imprisoned in a tower to the north, which, not coincidentally, is near Therion, the village they had been staying in. So we'll see more on that tower in a bit. So soon they followed the path-crawl nodes until they could hear the lake through the pathless wilderness. They decided to risk going through the wilderness because they felt the lake was close, rather than going around and trying to find a direct path that took them there. And they indeed passed the navigation check. Nothing went wrong on the check. And when I do checks, it's extremely simple. I just set a probability and roll against it. And if the roll succeeds, then what they wanted to happen happens. And if the roll fails, then something goes wrong. And I put the most likely interesting thing that would happen as the thing that goes wrong. That's basically the system I'm using. It's very simple. They find a lake that Stacy's character Styx had seen earlier, or indirectly, because he had climbed up a tree to see what he could see in the forest, and he saw the top of a tower in the middle of a depression where there were no trees around. So they knew that there was a tower somewhere, and they were proceeding as close as they could, trying to remember which way left and right hand led them when they went down a path. They were trying to get to that tower. And indeed, they followed the sound of the water. They followed the sound of the water to the lakeside and found the tower. Now, they weren't on the side of the tower that had the door, so they skirted around the edge of the lake until they could see the situation in the front of the tower. And it looks like there was no boats around and there was no bridge. So they knew that they would have to find some way to cross the lake. And no one in my games wants to get into the water. It's typically been a bad situation. So we'll see what they do next time. This was a really fun session of D&D for me, especially since most of it was just due to following up on an agenda I had written up. I had done other prep this week, but most of it didn't get used, although I did prep the town of Sextisa that week, and that got used a little bit. They didn't probe into all of it, not by a long shot, but I was glad to have it there and glad to come away with more riches in store for them for next time.
All right, that's a good place to end it.
It probably is a good place to end it. Roll a d12 to see if you win. You win.
11.
Yay!
All right, well, this has been the last episode of GG No Re.
Ever.
We won the game. Good night.